Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first episode of Talk About It, where we help facilitate faith conversations for families. I suspect your family, like ours, has been talking a lot about the coronavirus and how it's been changing our lives. We're being given a lot of rules right now designed for our protection. Rules like try to stay home as much as possible. If you do go outside of your house, you're supposed to stay 6 feet apart. Kids aren't going to school right now. A lot of businesses are closed, and like myself, some people aren't allowed to even go to their workplace. If we're honest, we don't always like rules, right?
That's right.
Yeah. But all of these are designed to do something very important, which is to protect us. And when it comes to these rules, they're working. They're protecting people from getting sick. And so we're going to keep following them. But here's what I've been thinking about. I think there's something else that we might need to protect right now. Can you guess what that is? It's our thoughts. You see, sometimes our thoughts make us feel anxious, afraid, or really angry. And when they get out of control, they can make us feel sick in different kinds of ways. So I think there's a great question for us to talk about today. And that is, how do we protect our thoughts from making us feel too anxious, afraid, or angry? Have you ever thought about that? Let's talk about it.
I have something I want to show you that I think is pretty cool, and it helps teach us more about what it means to protect our thoughts. Let me find it for you. Let's see. There's bicycle helmet, hard hat. That's not it.
Yeah, you used that a lot, didn't you?
Army helmet. Oh, that's interesting.
Hey, keepsake.
I'll remember this.
I do. Motorcycle helmet.
Here it is. Check this out. So helmets like this were probably worn in medieval times when knights went out to battle. All helmets serve an obvious purpose, to protect our head and our brain. What I think is cool about this particular helmet is that it reminds us of the armor of God. You can read about that in Ephesians chapter 6. The armor of God is symbolic of God's protection, teaching us how we can protect ourselves from things that might hurt us spiritually, emotionally, or even relationally. All of those things involve our thoughts. This particular piece of armor is called the helmet of salvation.
Helmets can protect our brain injury, but there is no helmet here that can protect our mind from being hurt by the things we experience, like hurtful words, sadness, fear, anxiety. So, what is it about this helmet of salvation that can help us to protect our thoughts?
You may not realize this, but every single person has trouble controlling their thoughts from time to time, whether it's anger, jealousy, fear, or anxiety.
That's true.
How many of you have ever felt anxious or afraid, and then someone says to you, "Oh, don't be anxious," or "Don't be afraid"? Is it easy to just stop those thoughts and feelings? Not really.
No.
Let's talk about it.
Here's what we want you to do as a family. We're going to ask you to pause the video for a couple minutes and talk about this question. What's one thought you experience over and over again that's maybe been troubling you, causing you to feel anxious, scared, or angry? When you're done talking about it, restart the video and we'll dig in a little bit deeper into how we can protect our minds from getting overwhelmed by these kinds of thoughts. I hope you guys had some good conversation. Now, the Bible tells us that Jesus is the source of salvation. So if we want to know how to protect our thoughts with the helmet of salvation, we should look at how Jesus did it.
In both Luke chapter 4 and Matthew chapter 4, we read about some temptations that Jesus faced. In the story, Jesus had been alone for 40 days praying and fasting from food. Can you imagine how lonely, hungry, and tired he must have felt after being isolated in the wilderness for 40 days? Think about it. When our body is tired, hungry, or weak, our thoughts and emotions are not easy to control. This made it a great time for Satan to tempt Jesus. Let's look at how Jesus protected his thoughts and saved himself from those temptations. Do you remember what he did? Every time a tempting thought came, or something he knew wasn't quite the truth, Jesus spoke truth to the temptation. He used the words of God in Scripture to replace the temptations that came into his mind. That's what the helmet of salvation is. It's the truth about God and the act of putting our trust in him. It's the truth that protects our thoughts from focusing on harmful things.
So the best way to protect your mind is to learn to test your thoughts, just like Jesus tested Satan's words against the truths he knew from the Bible. That means Jesus didn't just ignore his thoughts. He didn't just ignore the temptation. He didn't pretend like he wasn't being tempted. He didn't think about it over and over and over again. Instead, he challenged the thought with the truths that he knew. So how can we do that? Well, there are actually 3 C words that can help us. It's a tool that actually good investigators use when they want to find the truth. So the first C is to catch your thoughts. When you feel anxious, worried, or angry, take a few deep breaths, slow yourself down so you can catch that thought before it gets too big and becomes difficult to control. It's kind of like when you're walking a dog on a leash. If we keep him on a leash, we can control him. We control our thoughts by catching them before they run out of control on us. So catch a thought by naming the thought. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling scared. Often thoughts get out of control because we keep them inside. And when we keep them inside, often we keep thinking about them over and over and over again. And that's when they start to grow and get really big and out of control. And that's not what Jesus did. Jesus spoke out loud to the temptation, and when he did this, he did our second C.
The second C is collect. Collect the evidence for or against this thought. Teach yourself that feelings are not the same as facts. Good detectives and some truth tellers always look for supporting evidence when testing what someone says. You can do the same with what your mind is telling you.
The third C is to challenge your thoughts. Use the evidence to replace the negative and harmful thoughts that you're having. Here's where the Bible is our great truth tester.
We encourage you to try this with your family. Think back to the example that you or one of your family members shared earlier and use these 3 C's to practice how we can protect our thoughts.
You can learn to protect your mind with truth. And don't be afraid to even argue with your fears, your worries, your anxieties. They can't win against truth, which is our greatest protection, the helmet of salvation. We're going to post in our description below some key verses to look up as a family to keep the conversation going, along with some other links to techniques and tools that you can practice to help us deal with anxiety and other mental health struggles we might have. The first verse I want us actually to say together. It's found in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 in the New Century Version. It says, "Be careful what you think because your thoughts run your life." Let's say that all together on the count of 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Be careful what you think because your thoughts run your life. Why not try the 3 C's on some other thoughts that might have been troubling you? Until next time, remember, our faith is worth talking about.